So, welcome everybody. This is the 2023 annual general meeting for INCOSE New Zealand, the incorporated society that works in the interest of advancing the field of systems engineering here in the country of New Zealand. So I'm going to put my make sure that I'm sharing my screen and then fix all of my windows because that's going to break it as soon as I click share. And indeed, it's broken it. So give me a moment just to pull everything back together. So fabulous. Great. So again, this is the INCOSE New Zealand Annual General Membership Meeting, 9th of February, 2023. This meeting is being recorded for our record keeping purposes, and also just to make sure that when we do vote on the one motion and participate in the brainstorming later, we've got a record of who said what for accountability. So at this point, you should all be seeing my, you should be seeing an INCOSE New Zealand membership meeting title screen. Can get somebody to confirm that that's showing up?
Confirmed.
Fantastic, thank you very much. The agenda for the meeting tonight, after a bit of welcome, some chapter status and activities, the financial report, we'll install the new committee. Then we've got one motion to put to the membership tonight regarding transparency and chapter operations. We'll talk briefly about a couple of motions that we have been talking about and are either planning to or thinking about considering for either later this year or sometime early next year. We'll open the floor for general commentary, and then as time permits, we'd really like your input and thoughts tonight about meetup topics, themes, people, whatever that you'd like to see here in 2023. So attendees, so again, I'm Jessica Tucker. I've been the interim vice president of INCOSE New Zealand for this past year. Christian Parajan is the president and was the interim president, and I've been acting in his stead since he's moved away. So at this point, can I get somebody to, we need to achieve a quorum. So we've got 51 members, 51 financial members, 30% of those 15 need to be in attendance for us to have a quorum. Can I get somebody to confirm that we have at least 16 people in the chat?
Right, we do.
Thank you very much. I did get some apologies from folks not in attendance. I also got a lot of non-responses. So we'll going forward, if anybody's got any bright ideas about how I can make sure that folks accept and attend, or accept or do not accept, would be really appreciated. We'll rock on into chapter activity and status. So again, as previously mentioned, we've got 51 chapter members, which is a plus 15 since the last annual general meeting in February of 2022. We've had a few in the last 30 days that have had their memberships lapse. I think those were folks who got swept up in the excitement of the chapter formation at about this time last year. And I know from personal experience that some of the INCOSE membership reminders are easy to overlook. So we do make a point of emailing folks directly and gently nudging them to remind them if their membership has expired, to let them know and invite them to rejoin us. I'm really pleased that as part of that plus 15, we have at least 2 people who were INCOSE members in the long time ago, like many years ago, who have rejoined us, who have rejoined INCOSE specifically because New Zealand formed a chapter to advance the interests of systems engineering here in this geography. So that was really exciting, and it's been a good time. Well, I think it's been a good time getting folks together to talk about stuff that I love over the course of the last year. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the systems engineering professionals. So as you are probably aware, INCOSE has a systems engineering professional certification program based around a knowledge exam and then some work experience. We have a total of 8 systems engineering professionals, 4 CSEPs and 4 ASEPs, excuse me, who are New Zealand chapter members. Since our last annual general meeting, we have added 3 to our ranks: Ryan Bougen, Rick Anderson, and Robert Paternoster. Again, just it's great to see folks engaging and taking the step toward having their skills and experience recognized. And I hope that we will have more of these to celebrate in the future. There's a nifty pin. If lapel pins are your thing, there are nifty pins for each level of certification, and we make sure to either mail or give one to each member should they not have one. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on 2022. So at the outset, at this sort of first general meeting where we voted to incorporate, we laid this timeline out and said, this is what we think we'd like to do over the course of the next year. This is how we think we'd like to operate. This is when we think we'd like to do these things. And you all as members endorsed that, and that's what we worked to. And I'm really pleased to say that over the course of 2022, we set goals for our chapter, for our incorporated society, and we met those goals with the help of the membership. So just a bottom of my heart kind of thank you from myself and the rest of the interim committee. It's been really great to have you all with us on this journey, getting through through this first anniversary, so that we can recognize and celebrate the work that we do. 2023. Now, you may note that the timeline that's on here doesn't completely say 2023, and that is a slides artifact that I forgot about until it was too late. 2023, we're thinking is going to look an awful lot like 2022. We'll hold the annual general meeting now. Over the course of the rest of the year, every 4 to 6 weeks, we'll have meetups and webinars and opportunities for technical engagement. The committee meets on a bi-monthly basis for about 45 or 60 minutes twice a month to go over what we're doing and how we're doing it. We've got a tentative topic for late February 2023 related to the demystifying validation, verification, qualification, and certification, and then a series of other topics to be confirmed over the course of the year. The INCOSE International Symposium is in Hawaii in July, and as members, you are all invited and encouraged to attend. For your awareness, the sector paid the sector funded the attendance of one of the participants from the Singapore chapter to attend the international workshop, which was just held at the end of January. So if financial obstacles present a barrier, please don't hesitate to get in touch. If you're interested in going and might benefit from some financial assistance in that realm, let us know. Additionally, in August, the Australian Systems Engineering Workshop is being scheduled to be held in Adelaide. I suspect that's going to be a 1 or 2 day kind of event, sort of like it was last time, but it will be, I think the plan is for it to be in person only. So again, if that's something that you think you'd like to attend and participate in, make a ruckus, because we'd like to make sure that we can celebrate that along the way. We will be holding elections again in November, which means committee nominations will come out in September. And then spoiler, we're gonna ask you if collectively if you think it would be okay to hold elections every other year instead of every year, because it's a lot of work. It's more work than we thought. And so with that sort of the timeline for 2023, these are the goals that we're working to. One, the first and foremost is around sustaining and supporting our members. So we are here. This chapter exists because you all have agreed to come together for the purpose of being systems engineers and representing the profession here in this geography. And we want to make sure that you get value for money out of your INCOSE dues. And when or if you do pursue it, you get support in the preparation for the systems engineering professional exam and engagement with other systems engineering professionals. We also want to connect professionals across the country and region. Some of this is going to, we're planning will take the form of some social and networking events, like purely social events, getting together someplace, with a few dollars on the bar paid for by the chapter for the purpose of, supporting and reinforcing some of the social bonds that we have, especially if we don't have as much opportunity to engage across organizational lines as we might like. Also technical interchange and information sharing, making sure that it's not just our shining, smiling faces, but the thoughts and knowledge and experience that we have, so that the profession and the discipline can benefit from that sort of sharing, and a lot of cross promotion of regional and sector events. So you've heard me talk about the Australian Systems Engineering Workshop. There's a conference in India later in the year. The details escape me. I know I have it written down somewhere. And there are also opportunities to engage in seminars, in workshops, and in technical interchange forums with other professionals, in Australia, in Asia, Oceania, our sector. This year, we've also got a goal of connecting with education, understanding the landscape of systems technical education here in New Zealand. What do the engineering programs teach when it comes to systems and systems thinking, and working to influence the growth of future systems engineers, not just so that we can grow our ranks, but so that the impact and positive and benefits that our discipline brings to engineered systems can be felt with greater impact. And our last one, raising our profile. So it's pretty easy to get stuck into what we do every day and make just simply do a good job. But recognizing and promoting the contributions that New Zealand makes to systems engineering is something that should be a priority for us as a professional society for the year. We've also been kicking around ideas related to some branded content. I imagine that awesome Zoom and Teams backgrounds, very much like the one you see behind me, are likely to make themselves more readily available to the general membership later in the year. And I think that's all I've got in terms of chapter status activities, both reflecting backwards and looking forwards. So at this point, I'd like to invite Tom Mackay, who is the treasurer, to speak to the chapter financial update.
Thanks, Jess. It looks like you've prettied up the bullet point list I put in here. So I guess we basically started this year without even a bank account. So we had no dollars. And then once we got all that sorted, INCOSE Central, they've been our source of funds. So they gave us a startup fund of $1,000 US, which is at $1,600. And then what we get annually is based on our membership numbers, we get a bit of money paid out from INCOSE to do our own chapter business. And for this year, that was the $1,171. And oh yeah, a donation from Jess at the start. I think it was a bank account testing thing. Thanks, Jess. So this year we haven't actually, well, last year we didn't spend any money. So everything we received is still in there. And forecast expenditures is basically, it's up to us. So there is some sort of minor costs with having a website, but apart from that, It's stuff to fund what pretty much Jess just talked about. So if you've got some great ideas that even if they cost a little bit of money, let us know. That is your finances.
Thank you. Any questions from the folks online here about the chapter finances? Give it a pause.
I've got a question there, Jess. Just curious with donations, does INCOSE as an incorporated society enable people who make a donation to do a, the charitable donation refund out of IRD? I just wondered if anybody knew off the top of their head.
Good question. Go ahead,
Not
Tom.
set up as a charity, right? So I don't think we can do that as an incorporated society.
That's right. I think we looked at that, and we have we're not able to offer that. We're not able to offer that. All right, there is time later for other questions. We'll open the floor up. So if you've got questions and haven't asked, we'll have a chance to check in. So at this point, I am pleased to report, and I think Steve Wallace, as the secretary, can confirm that we held our election as planned, and that these are the results for the committee for 2023.
Yeah, I can confirm that we did hold an election. It was a whitewash, 100% votes for each of those committee members. So yeah, that is what the names for there are exactly what we had in the election. Thanks, Jess.
Here's Steve. Thanks to you for helping to set up that the election platform. It was not as perhaps straightforward as we might have wanted, and thanks to the volunteers who served as scrutineers to help us, keep us honest and make sure that we counted the votes that counted. So at this point, we've got one motion for a vote, and so what I would like to do, just for ease of, we only need a simple majority in order to pass a motion. So I'd like to, we'll ask folks to use a response emoji to indicate their assent or agreement. I think everybody knows how to do that because we're all very highly experienced in Teams, or not in Teams, in Zoom at this point. But I can't find my response thing on my screen. Where is my response thing? I see some folks have clicked check, but well, I'm not going to vote. So, but we'll put it to the group. So this was a motion raised, I think, by John Welford, who I think is, if you have, by the way, at this point, if you have indicated a vote, if you would please take it down, just so that we can make sure that all the test votes don't get counted twice. Thank you. So one proposed motion. I'm gonna sort of read the stuff that's on the slide, and then I'll invite John to comment further if he would like to. I don't, maybe John's not on the call. Yes, he is. Great. So great. I couldn't see you. You disappeared on the tiny screen over there. So John, why would you mind just sort of outlining what it is that this was about? What the sort of goals, what we're trying to achieve here, rather than have me read words, you can say it in your own voice.
Sure. So as I'm the incoming secretary, I partly wanted to make my life easy, and I thought if we just had everything on the website, that would save distributing to some people and not others, and that kind of thing. But also more generally, I feel like as a society, we should be aiming for transparency in what we're doing. And one of our goals is around promoting systems engineering. So what better way to do that than by making everything that we're doing transparent and available to people, so that it should reduce the overhead burden in terms of telling people what's going on, what's been discussed at meetings, and evidencing that we are actually doing things. If we're able to say, look, here are the minutes of our last meetings, they're all available on the website. People can go there, see what's been discussed, see what's going on, see what's upcoming. My thoughts are this would just make all of our lives easier and is a general good thing to do. That is possible issues around data protection and things like that, but I think that's stuff we can work around, and I to be honest, don't think there's many cases where that's likely to come up. And I think it'll definitely help with around handover planning and legacy and things like that, if we just have all our stuff in one place rather than stored on people's hard drives and in emails and things like that. So that's the main thrust of it. Anybody have any comments or questions?
I think if the proposal is to put recordings online, I think you just have to make it clear before you start any recording of any meetings that are going to be put online that it is going to be publicly available.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we've already started doing that with some of our presentations. That we have a YouTube channel that they're going onto, and I think it's worth noting as well that other than the AGM, our meetups are freely open for non-INCOSE members to attend. So if somebody really wanted to know what's going on, they could just attend and find it in person. So I don't think there's anything that we are really hiding or losing by doing this.
Might this discourage? Well, there's a pro and con of this, isn't it? So by putting the meetings online, it might promote people to join, but it might also have the opposite effect of people not needing to join in order to attend these meetings.
That is an
Okay.
issue that affects just about every organization that hosts meetings, that posts recordings of presentations online. It certainly won't make us unique, but I think that based on past presentations and the amount of engagement and participation that folks have, I think that there will be a benefit of having. I think that there will still be value in having folks attend real time, attend and participate real time.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I personally would rather not see systems engineering as an exclusive club that you join INCOSE to be a part of. I want to see it as an engineering methodology that's used widely. And yes, INCOSE is going to be doing useful stuff to help promote it. And it's great if people are members, but there's a whole bunch of reasons that they might not want or be able to be members. And I wouldn't want those people excluded from hearing what's going on and being able to access all the good content.
There's the flip side of that risk as well, I guess, is that there's a lot of people who like to try before they buy, and so actually seeing what we get up to before they join can actually encourage more people to join in the long run.
I'm just wondering whether there's a happy medium where at the end of the meeting there can be question and answers that aren't recorded, so that so it still promotes discussion and people aren't worried about their questions being recorded and looking embarrassed as they sort of learn more about systems engineering. Would that maybe address some of people's concerns?
Yeah, I think that we can certainly adopt that as a way of working. That the presentations are recorded by default, and possibly leave it up to the presenter to indicate whether they prefer questions be recorded or not. I think Corey's got his hand up.
Yeah, one happy medium, I think, along those lines would be the presentations given at the open meetings and our notices, you know, like invites, announcements, etc., for stuff coming up be on the public side of the website. But I think some factors, and I don't know the difficulty in setting this one up there, John, but we have sort of like just a simple login like the INCOSE website does, and that the other stuff maybe more the planning meeting minutes, you know, the more nuts and bolts of how the society is behind that paywall. So, well, not paywall, but behind that level of protection, just because depending on how in depth or what has to be recorded in the AGM, you know, that personally identifiable information can get out, and, you know, it doesn't take much for people to analyze that to build up a profile attack. Sorry, I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you know, we work all in a number of quite sensitive industries at time, and it's just something that could be of concern. But I'm fully for the presentations we have at the open invite meetup should be freely available. And I think having them on YouTube and having them on the open side of the website, if that's an idea I think we should pursue, would be the best way. And then the INCOSE chapter stuff, you've just, you know, it's just behind something simple. I don't know how to set it up. I'm not an IT expert, but it's something we could research potentially.
Yeah, I think there's probably options around that. Probably just needs a bit more investigation.
Are there any other questions around this particular proposal? All right, that was a count of 7. So at this point, I'm going to ask folks who are in support of this motion to please react with a green plus check in the chat. And then I'd like to ask Steve Wallace to help count to see if we get to see if we get half of the participants to endorse this. All right. Corey, clapping doesn't count. Very good.
I've counted 9+, so
great.
We're good to go.
Fantastic. So we've adopted the motion. We will take some we'll make an effort to make more of our working materials available, taking into consideration concerns around privacy, and, you know, making sure that stuff that should be just for the chapter is, you know, of limited accessibility to non-chapter members, but also trying to maximize the sharing of knowledge and experience. So thanks everybody for that one. So we've got 3, one planned motion and 2 potential motions that will be put to a membership vote at some time later. The first planned motion is only planned because when I went back and read the Constitution and bylaws, I didn't quite meet the cutoff deadline for getting it into this annual general meeting. So there's a bit of overhead that's related to holding elections on an annual basis, and our membership is relatively small. So we think, you know, I am planning to put forward a motion for the membership to vote on to increase the term of elected positions from 1 year to 2 years. I don't think I'm not planning to ask for a change in the number of terms. So we have a term limit of 3 consecutive terms in any particular role. And we also will do some language update so that our Constitution and bylaws are consistent with recent changes to the Incorporated Society Register. There's an Incorporated Societies Act of 2022 that I think should be mostly just an administrative update for us, but we'll just make sure. So proposed changes will be submitted to membership at least 30 clear days ahead of a general meeting. So we'll either wait till we have our next annual general meeting in February 2024, or we'll organize one specifically for this purpose. There are two other potential motions that we're considering related to establishing some memoranda with Engineering New Zealand and also with MB. And as some of you may know, Engineering New Zealand, who organizes the chartership program, chartered engineering program, does not currently recognize systems engineering as its own separate discipline. So engaging with them to see if we can get to a place where they do recognize what we do as distinct and separate is something that we might put some effort and energy behind. Additionally, on a sort of related note, MB has put forward a requirement for people with the title of engineer to have title of a professional engineer to have an accreditation or certification or chartership associated with that. And I think we'd like to explore with MB what, and potentially in conjunction with Engineering New Zealand, whether the CSEP accreditation might be used, might be leveraged for that purpose. So these are potential things. If you've got thoughts around those, they'll be socialized far enough in advance that we'll make sure that folks have an opportunity to weigh in. And in general, all members are invited to present motions for the society to vote on. We put a call out ahead of this annual general meeting, and likewise we'll do so ahead of any subsequent general meetings, so that people can participate and propose as needed. So with that, I'd like to open the floor. Questions, comments, thoughts, observations from members in attendance. I recognize we're eating into everybody's dinner times, and so I want to be respectful of your other commitments. But I also want to make sure that you have an opportunity to put your hand up and say something if you'd like to do so. David.
Obviously, with 51 members and 30 of them being, and 16 of us being here tonight, I'm just wondering if it's worthwhile maybe thinking about, obviously at work we have lunchtime learning type sessions, and I'm just wondering if lunchtime, I'm putting it out there that lunchtime might be a alternative time to host these things.
That's a fair point, well made. Historically, we've hosted things after hours because work calendars can be challenging, but I do recognize that after hours presents its own set of challenges. So thanks for that, David. I think
what I mean really there, sorry to cut you off there, Jess, but just I'm thinking more about when we actually need the numbers for like AGMs. I think the actual presentations are perfect for this time of the day, but I just mean for when we need the numbers, it might be easier to get a hold of people at lunchtime than it would be, potentially when they're sitting in traffic or whatever. So sorry, I never made myself very clear with that.
No, that's thanks for that. That's a good idea. We'll look at that going forward. We'll beta test that when we put the constitution changes to a vote.
Cool.
Corey.
Just along that lines, does our constitution allow electronic voting for things like that? Because I know I've been a member of other clubs and committees and so forth that have changed their constitution to allow electronic voting for, I think, just about everything, actually. But, it could be that we could ring fence constitutional changes or major constitutional changes out of that, whatever that definition is, but other stuff for like, approval to spend funds, etc. Because, everybody's now engaging, online, and we're doing this as an online meeting. So it might enable us to put a motion out there, the meeting here, and say, right, for the next 12 hours, this is the meeting, and I'm using air quotes as I say that, is open. Here's the proposal, everybody votes on it, and then it's returned to the membership afterwards.
A great idea. We'll look at, I don't know what I don't think our constitution explicitly permits that, but if we're making some changes, that might be something to cover. Tom, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So you touched on the MB requirements to call yourself an engineer. Last time I looked at that was ages ago, but indicated back then that the time frame for that to matter was the order of 2030 for when engineers have to have all their ducks in a row. Is that still the case, or do we need to be rushing something?
The last time I looked, which admittedly was not in the last quarter, it was still far enough out there on the horizon. But if any engagement within organization as large as MB is no doubt going to take some time.
Yep.
So.
Thank you.
Yep. Luke, you've got your hand up.
So just looking back at your goals for 2023, and they all look good. I'm just wondering if we need something along the lines of contributing towards the specific challenges of New Zealand. You know, so recently we've obviously had the flooding and what have you, and you know, New Zealand has specific challenges around transportation and, you know, earthquake resilience and all that sort of stuff. And I'm just wondering if perhaps addressing the challenges of New Zealand ought to form part of your goals, or something that's some part of our purpose statement or something like that.
I think it's a good idea. I think I'd like to flesh that out with you a little further. If you hear hesitation, it's because I don't want to propose something that would be, you know, if we go down a path of having our efforts recognized as part of, you know, Engineering New Zealand's specific like, you know, discipline and, you know, technical scope, I would not want to duplicate what they're doing. But if we were doing something distinct, I'd want to be able to express and understand that. Certainly something to think about.
I'm just putting it out there because I mean, I haven't really formed my idea properly either, but I feel it's as responsible engineers, it's kind of, it feels a bit like it should be part of our duty to at least think about the specific challenges of New Zealand in some way, shape or form. But
I don't have our charter in front of me, but I believe our sort of aims and objectives do have something that sort of speaks to that to some extent. It's about promoting systems engineering and systems in New Zealand, specifically for the INCOSE NZ chapter. And I think to the previous point on electronic voting, I think we did discuss that around the charter as well. And although we don't specifically include electronic voting, we don't specifically exclude it either. So I think where we're talking voting, electronic is one of the permitted mechanisms by assumption, if not explicitly. But it's probably worth referring to the charter and similar in answering some of these questions.
And just a small point, or following up on your question, Luke, I think I was at a UN Sustainable Development meeting today for New Zealand, or in the mighty Waikato, and one thing we could maybe start with in that objective around education is how systems engineering can help around, you know, there's a big push to educate around UN Sustainable Development Goals and solving all the problems that exist in the world. So I think an easy way to start addressing that and integrating across other disciplines it is to address systems engineering through some of those UN Sustainable Development Goals, which pretty much cover every problem in the world. They're quite wide ranging. So I'm happy to be involved in any discussions on that side of things as well.
Just typing. Great. Any other thoughts or comments? Anybody want to pick up the mic?
Sorry, just a random thought. So I think I suspect any accreditation with any professional bodies will involve some sort of competency-based assessment. There was a discussion in IS like in 2019 where I think the UK were trying to promote a more competency-based CSET assessment rather than a sort of time-served kind of assessment. And I'm wondering if those professional organisations will demand something similar.
Certainly, we would want to make sure that we understood MB's requirements and could either sort of show clear alignment or address any gaps if we were to take it forward in that regard. But the fact that it's been discussed elsewhere in the context of CSEP versus chartered engineer means that we might have some data that we can mine to figure out a reasonable starting point.
Yeah, there's also within Engineering New Zealand, the degrees need to be classed as a professional engineer. You need to have completed a Bachelor of Engineering Honours degree by a certified university or equivalent. So there's quite a lot of work to get to pure certification. Not just whatever we do, there's other prerequisites in terms of degrees.
Lunchbox.
Never as easy as it sounds.
Why is future motion I'm happy to have thrown the idea out there and gotten some feedback. You know, an idea that other people have already thrown rocks at that still stands up is a stronger idea than one that didn't. So if it does prove to be too challenging or too far out of reach, then that's certainly something to think about.
I think, yeah, it's definitely is worth looking into because there's a lot of value in it. Yeah, because that's the way UK are going. So around the certification. That's exciting.
Just one question to throw in, because is it CISA, the Systems Engineering Society of Australia? They're tied in through Engineering Australia to provide chartership, if my reading and my recollection's correct. Since we are, trans-Tasman cousins, maybe that is a potential route to go down. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we engage with them to go, hey, show us your guidelines and stuff, and then we just bludgeon Engineering New Zealand with it. I say that as a person who does not have a Washington Accord qualification, and so that is a constant bugbear and semi-panic as this MB death train continues rolling on.
Okay, I'm not an engineer either. I'm a scientist, so.
I got in touch with Engineers Australia about using CSEP to get chartership, and their response was basically just apply. But what I have heard and what their website kind of implies is that you can get through to basically the interview stage by having the CSEP. So that gets you enough to get, I guess, to the part where they talk to you and verify that you're not lying. So we could actually just go through Engineers Australia possibly without anything formal, because they recognise a CSEP.
True.
Oh, sorry, one more thing before I forget is for all of those of you who are recently ASEP or CSEP, congratulations. And just a reminder that they do need to be renewed every 5 years, I think, for ASEP, every 3 years for CSEP. So just maintain your CPD logs. It's better to do it as you go along rather than all at once at the end. So just a top tip there.
Yes. All right. Well, I think we'll make this probably the final call for questions, comments at this point. We're coming up to the bottom of the hour. All right, that was a 7 count. I didn't hear anything. So if there had been time, it would have been, I think, a good thing for us as a group to have done some of this brainstorming so that instead of the committee simply trying to put together a program of topics, that we get some input direct from the membership, so that the things that you're hearing about in INCOSE New Zealand activities are interesting and relevant to the work that to you and your practice. However, in recognition of the fact we're out of time, we'll either postpone this or see if we can't get some online asynchronous means to collect some thoughts from the folks out there, so that we can make sure that you're getting value for your money and time here. So just some quick acknowledgements. We'd like to acknowledge the following people for their roles and contributions to the chapter in 2022. Jawar Bala, who I don't think is with us this evening, but has been a real stand-up kind of dude when it comes to helping us helping us engage and participate in the context of CISA and elsewhere. Serge Landry, who is the Sector 3 lead for INCOSE. He's the person who makes sure that we know about all the resources that are available to us, so that we can pass that information along to you. Steve Dennehy, who has been a vote counter, idea generator, and all around good guy. And Christian Parajan, who has moved back to the UK, and will, I think, be setting his chapter, realigning his chapter membership. So this is a partial list. These are the ones that sort of came to mind at the top. But across the board, plenty of others have offered support, advice, encouragement, enthusiasm, and energy. And that's part of what makes us awesome collectively as a group. So yay us. Right, so at this point, it is 6:31, and I'd like to move to adjourn this annual general meeting for INCOSE New Zealand. Can I get someone to please second the motion?
Yeah, I second that.
Fabulous. Thanks for your time and attention, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being part of this. It's been a bit of a wild ride, but I know that I've gotten some value from it, and I hope that you have too. So we'll post this recording online in a move to maintain our new goals around transparency, and see you all next time.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers,
Well done,
team.
Jess. Thank you.
Bye-bye.